hearing here. Welcome, thank you all for coming, great to all be here. The gavel was wielded by Nora Brown, and this is her last meeting, she's doing that. And I can say from personal experience, she's been an incredible addition to the NRPC staff and help us in cutting these projects. We've got a full agenda tonight. We've got 4 speakers, 3 at a kind of quality panel, and then another speaker, and then we have 2 action items approving the transportation planning initiative work plan and approving committee assignments for the upcoming year. And so with that, I'm going to have introductions done a little bit differently. As Catherine was suggesting, and have each table just announced themselves that they are who they represent, or staff or whatever, rather than identifying them. So why don't we start over here?
Sure. Amy Adams, staff.
Yvonne Dandram, Town of Franklin.
Bob Mervin, South Arrow.
Barkley Morris, Grand Isle. David Driver, Swan Woods.
Elizabeth Banks, St. Helens City.
Kirk Wade, Georgia.
Olivia Johnson, Iowa. Sarah Haddon, Nation, Florida.
Miller Wing, Bakersfield.
William Allen, Fairfield. Robert Murphy, Fairfax. Maureen Brooklyn, Fletcher.
Top for your staff.
Stuart Stites.
That's our staff.
Andy Holly, what you're. Dean Kerstad. Doug Bergstrom, Georgia. Matt Johnson,
Marna Georgia, staff. Martha, staff. William here, staff. Dan, staff. Hello, Barry,
Dave Works, Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, St. Helens.
Brennan Hall, Bakersfield. Adam Richard, staff.
Peter Seymour, South Hero. Hey, well, I have to say that happened at about a quarter of the time we were.
Oh, Sean Coleman, staff.
And online people.
Oh, yes.
Nick Bresso Swanton.
Matt Stebbins, Town of Sheldon.
Nicole Draper, Town of Swanton.
Looks like we have Michael Miller. I'm reading it right as well. Okay. Are there any comments from members of the public? Hearing none, the next item will be entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June meeting. Motion second, and then you have any discussion. Your motion.
Some sorry.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I actually did have a small correction, and I apologize if it was my misspeaking last month, but the June, the minutes from June on page 1, line 41, it keeps the June meeting we canceled for the, VEC, the non-economic project, all that, and it wasn't canceled, it was the next day, but July, which is tomorrow, is actually canceled. I mean, I've got the July tomorrow is not canceled. The minutes say that July's meeting is canceled. It was the June meeting that was canceled, which was the next day. They're always the next day from our meeting, which we have operated. But anyway, the meeting tomorrow morning is on, and the main agenda item is substantial change for London water project.
Any other comments on the 2 minutes? Yep.
I'd like to recommend it on line 84, instead of saying the executive committee recommended them, that for clarity, say the executive committee recommends approval.
Any others?
I'm fine with those changes. I want to make a motion, I would say.
That's bad.
Yeah,
I don't find which line from where it says all officers were elected, I'd like to see the slate of names actually listed in the minutes, so it's well documented who they were.
Proposal. Anything else? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as supposed to be amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay, the motion passes. Next, we're honored to have with us a fabricated start to talk about the economic situation in Franklin County, including Jim Smith, newly appointed Commerce Secretary, and, excuse me, Tim Smith is the Executive Director of Franklin County. Now, I'm very here, it's the paper, I can't even read. Dave Cook, who is, newly appointed Commerce Secretary, and Kendall Smith, Commissioner of the Department of Labor, to talk about conditions and forecasts of economics in Franklin County and others of which they may be tips. I think we're going to try to do some kind of a quadrilateral now, and then, we'll entertain questions or comments that I didn't through.
Andrew, I want to.
Bravo is standing to the owl, drop of that, we're owl.
Not bats.
Thank you, Catherine. Really appreciate the commission, inviting us in. Again, Tim First, Secretary for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Listen, I grew up here. I grew up in the town of St. Albans, and I grew up on a dairy farm. Certainly the news and the challenges that we've been hearing, specifically in Franklin County and more specifically in the dairy industry, is concerning. Whether it be Perigo, Franklin Foods, and then obviously most recently, Dairy Farmers of America. The Agency of Commerce and Community Development, just to give you kind of a broad overview of the agency, has around 100 people. Has 3 different departments: economic development, which probably I'm going to touch on most about here tonight; housing and community development, which I often talk about, seeing the significant housing crisis we've been dealing with in recent years; and then tourism and marketing. We work very closely with regional development corporations around the state, and then also our regional planning commissions as well. Again, thank you all for your service to your communities, and it's so challenging to find volunteers out there. For you to provide the energy and effort to your communities, it's greatly appreciated. So just thank you on that. So in regards to some of the economic challenges that we've heard recently, we certainly have been having communications with Perigo, Franklin Foods, PFA, and it kind of runs the gamut. I'm happy to maybe get into some details later during Q&A based upon what folks want to dive into. But each of those circumstances is different in regards to the challenges that they saw, and certainly what we're seeing play out. And it has further complicated, frankly, some of the communication that we've been able to have with each of those companies. Some of which are, certainly one of which is a international publicly traded company, which creates some challenges on what they're able to communicate to us. Speaking specifically to Perigo, just around it. But with that, Governor Scott has talked about the 2 Vermonts. We're certainly very aware of Chittenden County and the economic engine that is there. When you look at the rest of Vermont, it's so critically important for us to support our working lands. And dairy is a significant component of our working lands. We certainly know and appreciate that here in Franklin County, but it's not just in Franklin County. We have pockets in Central Vermont. Addison County, certainly very, very significant with Agromart and Cabot. I would like to know, before the announcements that we've had, Governor Scott and his team actually have been working on various proposals that I would just like to work through, some of which have made it across the finish line in years past, albeit somewhat modified. But we do thank, Secretary Nancy Tibbetts from, Ag Agency. Unfortunately, he's double booking tied up tonight, but, there are some real opportunities, even with some of this distressing news, to move forward with frankly the assets that we have here, not just in Vermont, but for Frederick County. So one tool that we proposed and the governor has proposed in the past is project-based TIF. And some folks may be somewhat aware of project-based TIF. Obviously, the city of St. Albans has done a great job with a municipal TIF on the downtown. For a number of years, the governor has been proposing project-based TIFs. The increment financing that come out of TIFs, and we'll go down that rabbit hole, can be extremely helpful, not just in the housing sector, which is where we've seen it most recently implemented now about a year ago. But it can also be very helpful for industrial development. So when we're looking at conversations with the Agrimarts of the world, the Hoods of the world, and they're looking at opportunities, tax increment financing can be a very effective and useful tool in that way. That's something the governor has proposed in the past. We're continuing the conversations this summer, obviously with the most recent news. If I'm looking at the glass half full of milk, the legislature, when we proposed this a couple of years ago, again, it was much more broad, looking to help out on the industrial development side as well. With the number of housing units that have been lack in Vermont, the legislature looked to narrow the scope, which is obviously their purview, and narrowed project-based TIFs specifically down to housing. Governor and the team were very happy to sign that into law. It unlocks about $2 billion for infrastructure for housing, and that's something that will continue to move forward on. But we do think there is still an opportunity to use that specifically in industrial development, which also would help out the dairy sector. Capital investing, capital improvements. As we all know, with the demographic challenges that we have here in Vermont, aging population, shrinking workforce, as we have Commissioner Smith here, she may touch upon it later. Employers are often saying, hey, we need workers. We don't have enough workers. Naming the sector, it's going to be the same type of issue. Towards the end of the last legislative session, we were working with legislators to implement and put in place a capital investment refundable tax credit program. That's a program, frankly, that we see some of our competitive states utilize, including New York State. I should note that in working with the Agency of Agriculture here over the last number of months, they would tell you they've been walking through state by state and looking at the tools and programs that other states are utilizing. New York State has a refundable tax credit, so the idea behind that is you're a company, you're looking to do investment of some sort of machinery, some sort of equipment into your facility. You can either take some sort of tax credit, or there are some instances with some industries where you're not going to have a tax liability that is for refundable tax credit and actually receive money on that front. So again, that's an opportunity we see moving forward, and we'll continue to have those conversations. Regulatory reform. So currently, the Agency of Natural Resources is reviewing various regulations that affect the dairy industry. Looking at our other competitor states and states that we're specifically looking at are Massachusetts, Maine, New York, and Pennsylvania, and just trying to see what are they implementing, what are they doing, and what opportunities are there for us to do here. I would say I would almost try to kind of compare it to housing. We've worked very closely with Catherine Dimitri and other RPCs around the state to look to modernize and update what we do on the regulatory process, on the housing side and on the community development side. Frankly, we think there's an opportunity to do that on the regulatory side, on dairy and agriculture as well. Transportation. So additional conversations that we have with V-Trans is in regards to weight limits for trucks. Again, when we look at other districts that are hauling milk, they have, their limits are higher than what we have here in Vermont. And so, again, we're taking a look at what the opportunity is on that front. It's not just dairy per se. You know, when I talk about working lands, well, we think of dairy as maybe kind of a king here or queen in Franklin County. It also deals with the forest product industry as well, i.e. logging. And so frankly, there's an opportunity to potentially make some modifications on that front, again, to help out on the working lands front. I'll stop now. I'm sure Tim, who's been a great partner in all this, can weigh in some more additionally. And then, I know we've got Commissioner Smith, who can talk a little more specifically on employees, and what we're doing through the Department of Labor.
Thanks, Dave. If the truth be known, I thought I was being invited to have dinner and listen to Dave support that. But thank you for having me, Catherine. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for everything Regional Planning does. I'll get into some of our collaborations a little bit later. But interestingly, I was up at, happened to go to the Jig in the Valley up in East Fairfield over the weekend. You leave the surprise party. Jig in the Valley is where the, but my daughter and I walked out on the Loyal rail trail, and interestingly, they have a historic marker by an old warehouse that used to be out there for transporting maple syrup on the Loyal Valley Rail Line. And on that placard, it said that 8,000 farms, and this was back in the 1800s, 8,000 Vermont farms contributed maple syrup to this distributor, who then sent it to the South Carolina region because it was utilizing the manufacturing of cigarettes and tobacco. Today we have 415 Vermont farms total. Back then it was 8,000. A lot of consolidation, as you might imagine. Cows, I've been in this job for 25 years. 15 years ago, Vermont had about 145,000 cows. And now we're down to about 110. Technology has kept up, so production is, and I looked up, Yvonne, you probably know more about this than I do, but production has kept up through technology and whatnot. But part of the issue that we're running into with DFA is that there's just not being enough milk produced for the infrastructure that's out there. So that's why they talk about shutting down DFA, shipping milk to other places. Paul Remillard, who works in my office, has two brothers that have a 1,200 head farm in Peru, New York. And they used to always send their milk to co-op. And then just recently, back in February, they were told by DFA, you send a third of your milk to Albany, a third to Springfield, and a third to St. Albans. So that was a huge reduction for St. Albans, and ultimately led to where we are today. There's overall, when we talk about job loss, it's about 600. 425 in Perigo, ultimately that's going to happen. Right now we're sitting at about 180 maybe.
It has about half of the layoff, the other half.
So they laid off as many people go back in the end of June. Now we have about 150, 180 left who will get laid off. We hope in 2021, we don't hope that they get laid off, but we hope it can still aid to at least 2027. This layoff in June was a surprise that no one expected that it was going to happen this quick. So when they've done that, and those individuals got laid off, they discontinued all of their production. So all those 160 were involved with production at Perigo. Now the remaining amount are just there for packaging. So Perigo is shipping product from Ohio, sends it to Georgia, Vermont to get packaged, and then distributed from there. So come, mid to late 2027, that packaging will will no longer exist, and then those individuals will be laid off as well. The problem with our layoff of 600 is we haven't seen anything like this, at least since I've been in this job. The closest thing we had was 180 laid off from Energizer in 2013. So in 2013, 180 were laid off. So the difference between then and now is we were fortunate enough to have multiple manufacturers growing. So Vermont City Tools, Milam, Ben Dairy, Jerry Calamo, the 180, maybe not to the exact figure, but the majority of them were absorbed into the existing workforce. Now, we still have companies looking for help even after COVID. That opening, and Kendall will maybe touch a little bit on this, but there's only about 100 in the county to absorb 600 jobs. Obviously, that's not gonna help. Look at that, we lost immigration as well. We lost them, but in some ways they were working virtual as well, but now they're being asked to drive to Essex. It would have been great if we still had immigration here to help absorb some of that, but we don't. So it's gonna be a long road is my point. I think we'll see a lot more people getting in their cars and driving to Tiffin County. Obviously, data is growing. I think Global Foundries is growing a little bit, and other companies. So I look at Kurt. Kurt, you worked in IBM for how long?
I know, I have done.
Yeah.
34 years.
34 years. And when Kurt was there, 10,000 employees, probably fifth of them or a quarter of them were from Franklin County. We had a lot of people getting on the interstate, but that when they downsized, I think we brought a lot of people back into the county. But now I think we're taking a step backwards in terms of traveling to work. We're going to have more people getting on the interstate and driving south. It's not. It may sound like it's all doom and gloom, but I think there are some good things going on. For those who aren't familiar, the president had designated opportunity zones, and Montgomery and Richford have opportunity zones. And basically what that is people who generate capital gains on sale of property, stocks, whatever, can invest in properties instead of paying the capital gains to the federal government. They can keep it. If they keep the property for 3 years, they'll save 30%. They correct me if I'm wrong, for 30% on their capital gains. If they keep it for 10, they'll save the full amount of capital gains. So if someone generates $1 million of capital gains, they buy a property in Richford, they renovate it, keep it for 10 years, they're able to keep that money and invest it in the community. So Richford is a new addition come January to the opportunity zone. So that could bode well for Richford for sure, with the number of their properties that they have available. Catherine and I had lunch with an individual on Friday to talk about an opportunity in Montgomery. So those are good opportunities for sure. We have developers who are looking to make Brigham Academy housing, and that will be great for Bakersfield as well. I would say that Catherine's regional planning and FCIDC have worked together to pay out what I would call catalyst grants to sort of move projects forward. We both contributed to CNI, FCIDC, and regional planning. We contributed to ID to do a feasibility study on how they might get water to the village core. We contributed money to Brigham Academy to look at coring, a number of different issues that the development company is looking at before they move too far with the moving into construction. We've had other projects in the past, can't take them offhand, Catherine, but so we work together and trying to use our funds in a very small amount, but to move projects forward. And I think, as we do that, the region will be better off as well. There's another negative, obviously, is cost of living, gas, groceries, town of Swanton, Village of Swanton, is experiencing difficulties with their dam and, their electric rates. And that's gonna be difficult for the residents of Swanton as well, and surrounding county and village. So there's a lot going on economically, not all good, but, I think with everyone, working in the same direction, we'll make some headway, but it's gonna be a long road, I'm sure that will do. Kendall, has been very helpful with the layoffs and trying to educate people. I'll discuss briefly that, the tax NRPC just received a $300,000 grant to do some training. So there's introduction to electricity so that people can move on to become electrical individuals, phlebotomy, and then LA money. So there'll be advertising for people to do that. Catherine has some green dollars that help train people as well. So there's going to be a transition in the workforce, I think. Manufacturing, we're not seeing any activity out of Canada. Usually I get 3 or 4 calls in the spring, 3 or 4 in the fall, and there's Canadian businesses wanting to know what we have to face, what's the workforce like. Some of them are just kicking tires, but there are also others that are interested. Another problem with Franklin County is we have no vacant space. Our vacant space consists of the old Swan Valley or Lucille Farms building out in the Swan Industrial Park, and the Vermont Brick building off of Route 78 in Hargate. We have no other, we will have vacant buildings, but right now, for a building, someone's looking for 10, 15, 20,000, we have nothing to show individuals who might be interested in coming to Vermont. So that's another problem that I won't speak too much further than that. I'll turn it over to Kendall. But talk about the labor support.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, thank you for having me here this evening. I will be brief because we in Zoom covered a lot. There are a couple other things that I'll just fill in for you today and see what questions you all have for us. Starting again with the dairy layoff, as the incident we're talking about, I'm going to go another kind of there behind here in some of our work. We also have been working with Hood and Berry with another fluid milk processor that goes this spring. So just from a larger sector view, the coupling of DFA exposure after Hood recently has been some strain for our farmers up and down the supply chain about where to bring their milk, the rates that offer that, as well as businesses in Vermont that are sourcing milk and dairy products for their value-added vendors, right? They're getting some milk from food processors, they're Vermont like nearby or Vermont Creamery. So we're trying to look again a little bit broader as well for responding to these specific layoffs and the impact of employees around. Now, what we're doing to also support the farmers as well as the businesses that are sourcing goods from these companies pretty actively with the money to the agriculture. So there may be other ripple impacts of these closures here in Franklin County, and I don't necessarily have that comprehensive list that you might hear about over time, whether from the farmers themselves or any other kind of food manufacturing companies. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Department of Labor, because again, we're not always a frequent flyer at our PC meetings, we do have four bodies of work. We administer unemployment insurance for claimants, and then as well as the businesses that can refer to contributions to us that fund that program. Labor market information, which is a lot of data, forecasting, kind of fleet of economists in our shop. Workforce development, we have 10 regional offices around the state, including one here in St. Albans in the state office building. That's open 4 days a week to the public, that anyone can walk in anytime and say, call me find a job, or can you look at my resume, or I want to practice interviewing, or I'm looking for training. We also can do that virtually too, by appointment. So we have different ways of serving, job seekers, and businesses, if businesses want to come to us and say, I'm looking for a buyer. For three people. And then we have workers' compensation, which is OSHA, some workplace safety. We also inspect all of the mosquitoes from the state on medical safety, a little unknown fact, just something the Department of Labor does, and workers' comp, adjudication, so there's stuff in the workers' comp claim. I think those are my four. I don't think I forgot anything, and wage and hours, so we're gonna have wage and hour complaints. But again, turning back to the layoffs. We've been working pretty closely with Carrigo, with Franklin Foods, and with TFA around supporting the impacted workers. As we said, it's about 600 people. And I will also just throw in, even though it's not necessarily the focus of this conversation, we begin to help layoffs. We certainly do. It's something that's going to be us busy, and I know you guys in the region. So that kind of, again, broader impact is being felt in other sectors, the whole area as well. In terms of what we're doing with those companies, we've been hosting job fairs, both on-site at the companies, as well as in our regional job center. We've been going in, we've been working with employees that want us to look at their resumes, that want to do mock interviewing. Carrigo and Franklin Foods have been very open and welcoming, and like, come in and please, help our employees, anybody we can, that's what their next step is. It's totally voluntary. No one's forcing anyone to talk to us, and they know what their next step is, or they're not going to have that conversation. DFA, we haven't been going on site to DFA, but we've been holding office, open office hours every Friday, from 2 to 5, for 75 specifically for DFA employees, as well as some mini job fairs. We had a little mini job fair at Erie County this week, as well as Champlain Valley Equipment yesterday, and putting some off precision tools tomorrow. So we're trying to be really proactive. In terms of how much folks are wanting to engage with us, some of that's also dependent on the severance packages. So some of these companies are giving pretty robust and generous severance packages. And so for some people, and personal financial decision making here about if you're ready to talk about employment or not, and all of this is voluntary. If there was one action item or ask I can make of all of you, and I can follow this up with an email to distribute, would be helping us get the word out to impacted employees that we're available as a resource, and that we're doing these job fairs, and that we're doing these office hours. We've seen pretty low engagement from the TFA employees, and I'm not really sure why. I'm going to say that to all of you here right now in terms of them taking advantage of these office hours and the job fairs. So I would love if I could kind of follow up with an email with when the events are, where they are, and if you're willing to distribute that, if you know anybody, or if you know anywhere in town where people are getting their information, and put it up on like a bulletin board or something. Again, voluntary, but we want people to know that we're able to help them with whatever their next step is. Lastly, I will say we do have quite a bit of money that we can support these folks with education and training if they need to do career change. So again, if we're not putting in necessarily an apples to apples transition, because again, limited employment choices if we want to stay in zero processing right now. But there's a manufacturing component to that, and there are a lot of manufacturers hiring, and we do have money we can pay for that and cost of their folks. So I'll package some of this up, and I will see again if you're willing to distribute it, if you are just willing to help get them without if you have directors, if you have family members, if you have neighbors that are going to stop really just saying they might benefit from a conversation with a first counselor. That's what we do. That's one of our core services. In terms of the good news, and then again, I'll stop and see what you guys all want to talk about. I mentioned the Market Information Division, Tim shared some numbers. Franklin County is the only county that continues to be growing population-wise in the state over the past decade, as well as with youth. So as we look to see around the more Asian population, we're a smaller state generally speaking, most other counties are seeing population decline, especially in youth. Franklin County is one of two that are continuing to grow. So that is actually a great asset that you have, and it's just trying to figure out how to leverage those skill sets that people want to contribute to their community. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time paying job, But you have the human capital asset, that other counties are struggling with. And so, again, I know, so sometimes that's hard to engage people and figure out, how to organize, but you all have human resources here that other counties are struggling, to seeing to grow. So I will end with that, and I don't know, maybe turn it back over to the chair here, or want to do Q&A, or.
Yeah, I think, perhaps if the questions for any of these three, go ahead and, let's have some. We're gonna take a bill.
So, have you started seeing an effect yet of what I call second tier or third tier businesses being impacted by these three lawsuits, or we seeing the pressure there also for them to cut back or deal with it yet?
I'm not
It's
sure.
early.
Although this week, so I haven't heard that there's been any immediate business reaction, but we've heard that concern from farmers, especially on pollen rates, and they have to go, further distances, and whether or not that means, I've heard this is from the, again, the agency act, the training committee here today. Whether or not some, farmers are thinking about doing their own hauling, and that actually be more cost effective for them to buy their own trucks and do their own hauling, or how they're gonna handle that. But I haven't, as far as like, again, I'm just gonna, as an example, of the areas where Vermont free range, haven't heard yet that they are making any drastic cuts or changes or business decisions, but again, their supply chain, so it's something for us to continue doing conversations with them about and monitoring and trying to stay ahead of, but we can help, identify where the source product from if needed, so they stay in the space.
Well, I mean, it's along the lines that, to say this as well, like, Frankie Cruz as an example, I think there was some question asked to when DFA was shutting down, how that may impact them, but, our conversations with John Elgin, again, lots of credit to John Elgin, the work that he's done out there, just to keep the lights on, tremendous credit to him. But in our conversation with him, he's indicated, he will still have opportunities to get.
I think, most of the businesses I spoke to thought this as an opportunity for them to finally get fully staffed. They felt bad for the businesses and the employees, many of them have been trying to get full staff for 2 or 3 years, and that had. So there will be an opportunity for some.
Question probably for Tim, how are we doing, continuing welcoming our Canadian friends into the area on tourism?
Well, we, regional planning ourselves, agents of commerce, we've been working hard to longer term to get a welcome center on the border. For those, I harp on this all the time, we don't have 89 coming into Vermont is one more active venues into the state. Up to 1 hour from my gate with 5 million people, and we don't have a welcome center. The welcome center for water for Vermont, and better water for not there. And Route 4, almost every thoroughfare in Vermont has a welcome center, but we don't have any coming in from the mountains. So, Department of Transportation did get a grant with some engineering, looking at some land in the median between the north and the south down. Over as well. That, they're going to put swamp and probably need one. They know it's no good to put something, south of swamp. We want to incorporate the whole county, we want to incorporate the islands, where people can get off and swamp and buy food in islands if need to. That's long term. We know where we stand with Canadians now, in terms of the rhetoric coming out of Washington, going on with people over the tariffs. We, as I said, we've had no interaction at all. I didn't make a note, they track you down. We do have a business in Montreal that does promote Vermont. I don't know if there's been any, we're checking to see if we've had any response from that company. But, we at the office, we haven't
So let me just, I guess, follow on what Tim said. So, on the tourism side, we've seen a 30% decrease of Canadians traveling into Vermont overall, over last year. In regards to the impact on the tourism industry, Canadians make up approximately 5%. Which for those of us who live here seems like rather small, but when I say 5%, that's the entire state. And so the impact of that 5% is far greater here than, let's say, down in New or Bennington County. Up here in Franklin County, we're probably talking more around 35%, on that front. Tim is correct, V-Trans, received an Oregon Board of Regional Commission grant. They're working on what a potential welcome center would look like just north of, Swallowing between the two interstate barrels of both the north and southbound lane. That would actually be, the first time that we would have in Vermont, rest area / welcome center actually on the interstate as compared to, one on the northbound lane, one on the southbound lane. So that, is progressing. The other thing I want to note is that Governor Scott is actually hosting the New England Governor's Eastern Canadian Premiers in early August 9th, 10th. So we'll have the premiers from Atlantic Canada, leadership premier from Quebec. Premier is not able to attend, but we'll have their Minister of International Relations who will be here, and then the New England governors as well. And certainly the elephant in the room during that discussion is obviously going to be trade and tariffs. But we assembled a really wonderful number of 3 different panel discussions for the governors and premiers. So anyways, just be on the lookout for that coming up here in a couple of weeks. But that also.
Yvonne, I do share with people that it didn't help that our men's and women's Olympic hockey team beat Canada.
Well, just one other thing on the tourism front. Sorry, I should just mention it. It's not your turn, but work continues to occur for Central Station in Montreal in regards to returning passenger rail service. So instead of having the terminus here in St. Albans, some folks in this room may remember when the train went right out to Montreal. So there actually are really discussions between the Agency of Transportation, New York State, Amtrak, and Transport Quebec on that. Amtrak, probably in the next couple of weeks, not on the table here, but sometimes the next couple of weeks to a month, will actually be putting out an RFP on construction, for construction study, construction plans for Central Station, which will, we're actually already in a feasibility study. There's a feasibility study on about a year ago. But this is actually basically the next last step to then kind of move forward. So conversations have already started to occur with CDSA and CDP as well, as far as having locations there at Central Station. So I'm talking about.
We can't speak personally about it. So right out of town, we really rely on Lake Champlain, the marinas. We really rely on our Canadian traffic. In our community, we have both American and Canadian flag, and wherever it's displayed, obviously they're displayed correctly, and we have solar light on the US flag, but they're the same size, and we do that intentionally as a welcome to our folks. I've lived there a long time, and the only people that are coming are rural property. And I have a French Canadian ancestor, my parents immigrated. I have 36 first cousins in Canada that are my age or a little older. They will not come. Either the spouse is worried that they said something in a post about the genocide and how, to the Palestinians. She's petrified of even coming to the. And I spent, my vacation was in fact, just the beginning of July, 8 days, from Quebec City to Tavistock, crossing to St. Lawrence, the Gaspé Peninsula and everything. Little worried about the reception, it was wonderful. However, the hour and a half drive from the North Shore of the St. Lawrence to the South Shore, I had a lovely conversation with couples from England. will not come to the US. They are doing a month-long vacation in Canada. I don't think you're the only people. And so this is, they used to come, they know about, they know about Boston and we just took we got an hour and a half to chat. And it just is the point, and it's very difficult. Our marinas, the governor was at the round table. Yes, yeah, I was there, and you had a marina, new owners from Montana bought this marina, and they can't get help. But they also can't get the businesses down. All the big boats that buy the gas at the marina are parked, or they come and they bring everything and they sit on the boats. And that is having a huge economic impact, not only here, but of course, across the lake. And, it's just been really difficult.
Billy, I would add that closing the border crossing at 4 o'clock, doesn't help either.
I would say there's plenty of other, Alphabet two borders, you have two Rouse's Point, Champlain, you have High Gate. I really don't think that's the issue. The issue is that either they're worried that they have commented about something and they're gonna be put aside, or like my cousin's spouse, she's originally from Brazil, and married my cousin who's been in Quebec all his life. But she posted something, she's a dual citizen, petrifying that there's gonna be some kind of glitch or something. It just is a very,
I might push back a little bit, because we were on a call with the senator as well. And all of the North Carolina, all of them were complaining about the border crossing at 4, no one wants to come down for dinner. They can go on the 4th, yes, but it's an inconvenience.
no doubt that it's not as convenient as if they close at midnight. No, but that's Albert. Moyan, and, the Albert, Moyan border and the Albert Springs for the local, so, and you have Albert.
So I thought that hurt.
Sorry,
I thought that hurt something.
maybe, but
Albert Springs closed at 4 p.m. Albert,
Moyan,
closed at.
yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I guess the only thing I would say is that, so the governor has been very public in regards to his displeasure with the president's remarks in regards to Canada, our neighbors to the north, both in his rhetoric and on his tax/tariff policy. At the state level, the governor has continued to foster his relationships, specifically in Quebec, but also in Atlantic Canada. Last December, he was actually up in Newfoundland, Labrador, talking about this very subject. And, I would say, some of the premiers were appreciative of him. But, they were frank and said, hey, don't expect probably a change. I mentioned the 30% decline that we've seen, for probably another 2.5 years. So they did say, continue to talk with your neighbors. So, I think it's great that you had an opportunity to have conversations with Canadians in the Quebecois. But we at the state level and then, at the local level, and I know when Tim was mayor, continue to foster relationships with the folks in St. John, Washington. And so I would just say that those conversations, that outreach is still ongoing. And we see the dialogue at the federal level, we're looking and still looking to turn the knobs and pull levers that we still have access to.
And that's appreciated. And, they always said, where are you from? And I said, Vermont. It was not ready by any means, so.
Other questions?
Yeah, I think this one's probably for Tim. I'm in the islands, so I'm out of the loop. Is Beta doing anything with the Everett plant? And is there any negotiation there to say ramp up production?
There's not much going on in Enterprise, but it is a major overhaul of the plant. But they only have 15, 20 employees in there now, totally focused on their battery R&D testing.
So is there any chance that they're gonna move some battery production in there?
initially that was the plan, they were gonna take over, the better plan, right now they've taken about 40,000 square feet. And they projected that there would be between 1,600 employees, they're not close to that yet, not sure, what the, what the plan is.
I can give a little bit of an update, just as a schedule would be a couple weeks ago. So your question is timely. They do plan on absolutely ramping up the St. Albans facility in a former Energizer facility. What is, I don't call it a holdup, but they have to go through an FAA certification program for electric airplanes, which has never been done before, ever. So they are, leading the effort. And that's a long process. There's still probably another year, about a year and a half, out from getting that, a certification. Once you get the certification, that's when things ramp up, production jumps. And that's when they really envision, putting to use this in all of it. So there's some optimism there. It's not, yes, it's not immediate, but yes. I guess the other, just if I run through my list, Kendall, I guess. Franklin County's population is growing, but is that largely because it's nearly impossible to find anything to live in Chittenden County, and these people are moving to Franklin County for housing, but they're still working in Chittenden County.
That is what I believe the reason is, but I cannot defend that with any data or polling, but.
I get the same, my husband and I moved to Fairfax 45 years ago, we lived in Portugal, with Catherine, everybody, so that's all we'll do that.
And if I could just finish along the tape, you're gonna raise the weight limits on trucks. State's gotta figure out what to do with the state roads and the interstate, so we don't have those big groups going down.
Well, I just wanted to get, we're looking at that and having conversations with V-Trans and DMV. No decisions have been made out, but frankly, we're just in the research phase, looking at, again, what Pennsylvania, New York, and other states have. To your point, obviously there are trade-offs, when we look at things. So again, we're just information gathering and looking at, states that are rich.
I'll try to, no, thank you.
Well, I'll ask a question. Is there any more information available on the upgrade of the port of entry in Hadley?
Believe they should start construction this fall. So for folks aware it is, the Highgate Springs Land Port of Entry is going to more than double in size over the next few years. We're gonna go from what we see now, five personal vehicle lanes as you come into Highgate Springs, and enlarging that to 7. They're gonna go from one.
I know, still only one open.
Yeah, exactly. I will say, I mean, trust me, I agree with him, they've been frustrated at times, but and again, when we talk about staffing and demographic challenges, it's every sector. We've had conversations with CVP, here in Vermont, I mean, they're short staffed. And, what I will say though, just in regards to that, when I'm thinking of it, if you're not aware, both CVP and CPSA both actually have apps that indicate in live real time the wait time at the border. So you can, they show you both historical wait times for days and hours, and they also give you live update. And so depending upon the time of the day, on the weekend, I can kind of predict, which some of us probably can. Is now the time to get Highgate Springs, or do we go to Albert Springs and Morris?
He carved it over because that happens, then everybody's out. I've seen it, so.
But long story short, my understanding is they're looking to start some of that work, fairly small. And it's gonna take a while.
I think we're gonna wrap up this.
And I just because it's so important, he talks about it. I know I work at the agency of agriculture, I'm not in the field a lot. A lot of my farms have shut. Well, River Basin, we had 2 roll-out farms closed, those cows went out of state. They didn't stay in the state, they didn't keep their cow numbers up. They went out in Pennsylvania. Okay, I was just I talked to Josh Cooley, we talked about the New York State tax incentive, please talk to Josh. We were talking about it, because he owns a plant out in, off Route 11, and he owns a plant up here in Newport. He's talking about those things, and, about the impact the working landscape spends their money locally. I talked to Brian Carpenter about, we had a medium farm in Albert. It was our fuel dealer's biggest customer. Shut down. And what kind, that's an impact. That's gonna affect how much how that business can buy the quantity now is down, so they can have it as good as the price. So it's gonna impact the other customers. You know, I talked to Brian Carpenter, their own Shepherd Valley, put them both acting for district commission. And we were talking at the annual meeting. He has a number of my farms that I inspect are his biggest customers, top 10, top 5. You know, he's worried. And, they haul their own milk. They can't. They're now, this new change means they may not be able to haul their own milk. No, because the new policy that they're going to have their own, the CFA's fleet yet. Some of these farms are large enough that they haul their own milk. And they could to the plant yet. Hauling off is significant, much harder than it was. I'm really worried about our infrastructure that supports them and that they spend money locally in our rural areas. And we need, I would love to see more data coming out of the Agency of Commerce about what's the total economic engine of the working landscape, the loggers, the ag folks. Because they're not gonna, it's not a business that can be purchased and taken away. They're right here, they're gonna stay here. I can't think of a better state dollar investment.
I don't wanna get over my skis for Secretary Kevin in the agency of agriculture, but, you know, just talking about, the number of cows, talking about the amount of milk and the reduction that we've seen over the last 10 years. I know they are looking at setting targets, right? So we talk, we around, go on planners here today, right? We talk about targets, right? And we talked a lot over the last few years about housing targets, right? You know, if we wanna address housing and we have a shortage of supply, I mean, I hate to say this, it's really simple math, trying to figure out supply and demand, what's the increase you need to get in order to, affect the market. Cows, similar situation, so I know the agency of agriculture is looking at, like, what sort of targets should we look at and start to track that information, so.
Also, a lot of my colleagues are in their 30s, late 20s, 30s. They're ready, they're done renting or we're losing we're losing that demographic because they're tired of renting and they want to purchase. So when I hear affordable housing, I'm hoping a lot of it is either townhouses, condominium, whatever your starter home is. I hope it's not just apartments because it's not going to keep these folks who are going to have children, who are going to be working here in the state.
I have to give credit to Catherine and the sheriffs. I think that's a great segue to Sarah.
Related to fast.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough to follow, my goodness, but thank you for the segue. Sorry, I've been sick for a little bit. So I'm Sarah Hatt, and I should have introduced myself, but Vermont Land Use Review Board is a mouthful, and there are those that call us borders. That does not sound good either, so, but I am from St. Albans, my hometown, still live here, and I was actually one of you a while ago, so, it's nice to be back. And, Catherine gave me a call and she said, would you come to our meeting? I said, sure, I miss you guys, absolutely. And, wanted to give some congratulations on being the first confirmed regional plan in the state. So you can get I'm gonna give a cake, but then I'd have to make 10 more and bring them around statewide and tell you different cookies, so, but a little bit of background, what is the land use review board? And many of you, when I say the word Act 250, yeah, there's some recognition there. It was, the Natural Resources Board reconfigured under, here are some other terms, Act 181, 2024. So now that I've thrown out all the trigger words, just a little bit of background I'd like to get into about how did we get here, just sort of a refresher. So what does this mean? Northwest has been doing regional plans for decades. You guys are pros at it. That hasn't changed. It's just a little bit in terms of what changed in Act 191 in 2024 about the requirements for regional plans, and also actually there was a lot there, and it was that all RPCs have to have now confirmed plans by the end of 2026 with standardized future land uses. So there's the concept that we're going to standardize your future land use areas, which have been in your master plans across the state. This has been a big task for all 11 RPCs to stand up in what was really a period of a little more than a year. And so what this has done and what NRPC navigated is going to confirm the confirmation cornerstone in creating areas of Act 250 exemption, your tier 1A area. And so what that does is your NRPC process then goes into let me back up. I wrote my notes and handwrite, and I can't read my own handwriting. I'm classic these days, so I should remember those. NRPC navigated this process as in the past by having iterative conversations. And that's so important. And as we go throughout the state, all the RPCs are going through, and I was just up at NVDA, Kingdom Territory, they have 62 different areas to get through. It's hard to have those weird conversations. You guys had a lot to get through, you have those weird conversations. Going out, educating, talking to different people, listening to your neighbors, educating, listening, adapting, creating a land use plan for the state as it was intended from the bottom up. This was a lot of change in a short period of time, which I'll bring this back to how do we keep Vermonters in the state. I have a college freshman. I don't know how my oldest got there, but she's going in state. And I was having a talk with her this summer about the maple syrup, or the lack of real maple syrup that gets served at our state institute. So just as a heads up, you want to keep them in state, get the real maple syrup. And so I was having a talk, it's like, this amount of change is about as palatable to Vermonters as maple syrup. It's not good. Many of the staff and commissioners have joined in these conversations, showed their extra names, listened to the neighbors. And I have to say, watching NRPC at your hearings, I was nervous. It's nice. I can see how like the handoff and how seamless everybody talked, doing the site visits. I was talking to Doug earlier. I remember you showing up to one of our site visits in Georgia. You guys all showed up, talked from the heart, knew it all. You had it down pat, and it was impressive. So kudos on that. Sure. Now with your first confirmed plan, sort of getting to what we were just talking about, where does this lead us? And many communities have now had the benefit of more permanent activity exemptions in steps for the community investment plan. So you have tiers and have steps, different benefits on different loans. Tier 1B communities get conveyed with the regional plan confirmation and have up to 50 housing units per project exempted. So that's a good first start. We had the interim exemptions that we're working through, and those got extended to Act 152 of the legislative session. Now we have the more permanent ones with Tier 1B. Some communities are taking a wait and see approach, so maybe opt into Tier 1B later. Again, this is a lot of change, so no pressure on new communities that now have Tier 1B, but others are watching and want to know and will be checking in. And so I think that's important, community trust factor of having conversations between communities about how it's going and, being and serving that for some other communities that might be on the sideline. So there could also be some that apply for Tier 1A that is a delegation of sorts, that can be both residential and also commercial exemptions. So, I'll come back to that a little bit later. NRPC was the first, and, we also had a 77-page response. I'm so sorry, that was almost as long as the plan itself. We're working on adapting that and trying to get more succinct. I think we want to make sure, because this is a new process for us all, we're building a plan and applying it, that we make sure we covered all bases. And so I had a question about, is it online? Yes, our database crashed earlier today. There's some technical difficulties, but the database is online. If you guys want to read the 77-page, I'm happy to email it to you too, if you're being able to take something of that size. But it is on Act 250, that Vermont.gov. Go under Act 181, regional plan, link to the database for it. So that's a little bit of back where we've come from, and I want to go a little bit into where we're going from, which is, the land use review board is continuing to work on the NRPC plans. We've had all 11 of the applications come in. We got through Central Vermont last week. And now we're on to, we had NRPC, we have hearings for Rutland, Chittenden County, we're going to Loyal next. And so we're working through all the rest by the end of the year, and hopefully getting, all those plans through the confirmation process too. We anticipate that we're gonna get our first tier 1A applications. I'm expecting probably the beginning of August, we're going to see our first ones come in. And so that's that confirmation, of a regional plan. Then those municipalities can apply for that tier 1A exemptions or delegation, and working through the communities on that. That's also probably going to be a few months long process, and some other communities are going to be waiting and seeing on that front. So that's a very exciting process. I've been shepherding the tier 1A process and trying to stand that up. I'm happy to take questions on that later too, as we've been trying to build that plan and apply it. A few other things that are in the hopper. The AOFB, accessory on the farm business report, is due in November, and there are going to be new exemptions going into effect next July 1st. So that report, as to the current state of things, is going to go to the legislature this winter. We have an 8C process, which is a new criteria within Act 250, which is forest blocks and habitat connectors. So that's for things going for Act 250. We're working on that. There's going to be some meetings in September, and we're hopefully going to have that ready to go for an effective date of January 1st, 2028. We have wood products guidance. We have a 9L, which is the sprawl criteria, report due in November 2027. Primary soil report due also in November 2027. And some other things that came out of that Act 152, which is S325, is for those of you that have municipal plans that were expiring during this period that could then disqualify you for some of the tier 1B exemptions. Congratulations, you got an extension, or extension until, until the end of 2027. So, there's a lot there, and I think the other thing is, I'll touch on is, we're going to, the next year, look to do our community engagement. So we were created all anew and sort of said, all right, go forward and meet all these deadlines. And then do your community engagement plan. For a little bit of planners, it made us a little bit itchy. And, retrospective, you can see where some of the discord happened because of that. So that's something that I'm looking forward to having and building over the next year, and working on how we engage people and have a dialogue on how we improve our communication process, accessibility, and, I think the other thing too, back a couple months ago, when we were going to think about the legislature, several of us made ourselves available to different select boards to go and talk, answer questions, just show up and listen. And happy to admit it, take some questions, but there's been a lot here tonight, and so just know that I am available for that. I am the Franklin County board member. We're supposed to be geographically dispersed throughout the state. Happy to bring another one along too. Come to your select boards, planning commissions, listen, answer any questions that we have. and really look to begin some of that engagement, sort of, from there. I think I also wanna talk a little bit about, I think we talked about the exemptions with that, go, that's a bright spot, but there's so many bright spots. And, seeing here tonight is, you can get down with some of these things that are going on, but, when we're talking about, like, Franklin County's broken. How do we build it? And, growing up with some of the people in this room, working with some. I know what Franklin is, and it's brutal. And the fact that you guys were first is not surprising. And we'll continue to do things. And so it would be great to see where some of these things go. I've heard some of the concerns from people that even though there is these exemptions, they're not ready to dive in yet with housing projects. There's a lot going on. Those are good things to hear and listen to and adapt. I think there are a lot of people here tonight that can listen to those things too. But I think we can all work together on this, and in fact, you guys are here to your this assignment together, we're all working together, and that's just what we need. So thank you guys very much. I'm happy to answer any questions and just stay around and chat and
I'll have one comment, which is you mentioned community engagement. I know for NRPC, Catherine and the staff did an incredible job going to each town, meeting in person with the select board, meeting in person with planning commissions. And it was such a great platform to bring to the community, so to bring from the communities concerns on each side and how to do things. And it's really played pretty well, I think, in my perspective.
yeah, and as I said, kudos, you guys have been doing it right, and I think our right spot on that front. I will recognize, going throughout the state and having been to all four quarters, there are a lot of challenges that we don't have here. I think it's oil, we're only 30%, just the next county over, only 50% have that sort of sweet spot foundation or municipal plan and local regulations. There are lots of communities throughout Vermont that aren't there. And so it's very hard when there are communities that have been doing this for decades and have plans in place, have a great staff that are going out and fostering these conversations. And there are communities that have no municipal plan or regulations, don't have the tools in place to have these dialogues. This is a lot all at once, and to have a real plan to come in and say, we'd like to know what future land use category we would like for this area, and could you get back to us by the end of the week, because our plans are. That puts everybody in a tough spot, but I think the fact that NRPC was iterative, you went out and, I don't know how you guys all did. And miles you guys must have covered, because you guys were actually at the meetings, not just on Zoom, and that I think really spoke to how you got over the deadlines. And so I'll recognize you guys did such a job, absolutely. It's a tough slog, throughout the state, they're reaching us differently, different towns that haven't had these dialogues. So, but again, I think going back to that model, or you guys all talk amongst each other in terms of regions. I think there's a good support network there, and I know that, NRPC has been a bright spot, and we will be those spots.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. You've got two, business items to address. The first one is, to take action on the fiscal year 27 transportation planning initiative work program. Draft is included in the materials on page 31. And, I assume that Kyle.
I am here again and answer questions that folks that have them. And we'll just note that the TAC has reviewed this and has recommended it for approval by the board.
Okay, well, maybe.
Unanimous. You did a great job.
All right, well, maybe we can, entertain a motion in a second, and then we can have further discussion. Is there a motion to approve the transportation planning initiative work program?
So,
Second,
Second.
okay, discussion? If not, I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? We have a pass. Then the second item is, fiscal year 27 committee assignments. We, identify the assignments to the officers and the committee chairs at our last meeting. In this meeting, we are considering approval of other committee members on each committee. And they're all laid out on page 28 of your materials. So I guess that is sort of understanding, people have a motion. So I entertain a motion to approve the committee assignments as set out on page 27 of the materials.
so moved.
Second, any discussion?
I will just note that committee assignments, even though the board generally votes in July, they're not permanent. There's always a chance to join the committee, so if you leave the meeting and think, oh, I really should have volunteered, let me know.
Especially personnel.
Yeah, especially personnel.
I like, sorry,
Go ahead.
but echo, then I know it's on one.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The motion passes. Clerk, will you accept?
Since Bob brought up the lack of bodies on personnel, I'd really like to bring up the lack of bodies on TAC. We frequently have barely a quorum, which is fine, out of 23 members. So each town, suppose each select board is appointed representative, so it's not the committee of the NRPC, but it dovetails with it, and I don't know, I think all of our TAC members are commissioners as well.
I just really want to speak to the value of it, because I got into this when I was in the state house, and got beyond from transportation committee. And I've always stood with my town, and I'm sorry that the recent years, there's great representation for the valley, for the communities, for the, road foreman, whoever has been, is really extraordinary, and we should all really be pushing our communities.
Yeah, that's an
It's really valuable. They get great support, we get to speak to the priorities of what projects are gonna happen in the area. Might not happen, but we speak with.
Can we find out what towns don't have a representative?
Yeah, it's on the website, if you go to the committees, and you would go to transportation advisory committee, will show you where the vacancies are. And I will say that this fall, when I do my select board visits, I'm prioritizing the communities where we don't have full board representation or don't have staff representation, prioritizing those as much as possible.
And that is me for being a public works person, more than someone, like us all, gives us a greater value in communities.
Can I also just make a quick plug? We do have several communities who have perennially appointed a person who I've been here for more than 3 years and I've never met them. So if you have a question about your community, just please shoot me an email. I'm happy to let me know if that person is going to be or not.
Okay, I think we're on to commissioner announcements. Anybody have anything?
I would like to mention, this is Chair Pack, that we have a couple of great interns who were very part of this year. Stuart and Isabel, I think we all here tonight. But thank you for your hard work. We do always seem to, transportation always does seem to get some great returns. This has been another year with real hard work. Thank you.
I should have been able to do the presentation presentation again.
I would just reiterate my correction to the minutes, also my correction to the report that was in the packet, that there is a meeting tomorrow at 9:30. If people want to hear about the buildings monitoring project. I really just depend on something in our area that was sort of what I understood. I started depending on, got the sense of really getting anything, we all have no place. They have meeting, but 9:30 is the meeting for it. It's on the ACC website. Yeah, it's not a project, we're looking for a major change. It's the whole. This is a district stuff that happens, so if we were having a project in Franklin, Great Isle, I. Theater that our ears, for like 2 years now.
Well, I have a question, and I missed it immediately, but has there been a speaker or maybe as a representative, talk about civic districts? Because I've got my education chair of the school board, hat on right now, and I'm not sure I'm a fan of the amount of money it takes from the education fund. I understand the improvements are necessary and all that, but I think the general public could benefit, and especially our commissioners, in being smarter on music. And that's not just a unique Vermont, because I've been on webinars where it's nationwide. This tax increment financing is nationwide.
I think that we did have, we have the opportunity at least to seminar, I'm not sure that it was in one of our meetings.
It wasn't, no, we co-sponsored something, that was a full afternoon.
And I have to say that I think I turned the word off, and we could really be happy to see my little face pop up in the meetings. When I make a comment, I said, I totally support this, I understand it, I, was in the process of the state house, I get it. But I just think that we need to know how much, when they talk about increasing the grand list, what would the original grand list have increased to the same date, as opposed to at that date for the bill, this is what it was, and now it's gonna be this. And I think they all felt that I was aligning the growth.
That's a legitimate question.
And they kind of all just, and I never get this understand, I really wasn't saying it's a bad thing, I just was saying I want clarity on this data, so.
And how many districts in them? I mean, like, Killington has a district district, Milton has one, Burlington has two,
Yeah.
Colchester has one.
I understand all of that.
But it's all education taxes that are collected as under the umbrella of education funding that's being diverted.
Well, the theory is, relative, so the state still gets more education funding than it would have for that. That is the theory, and I was looking for the.
I want to be convinced of that.
Well, I haven't been yet, so.
Any other announcements? Hearing none, motion to adjourn, so, second. We are adjourned. Thank you.